When a harmless birthday party descends into anarchy at a high level, whispers replace the laughing in the diner. When a request for dessert turns into a request for a far more severe matter. But when a strong person passes through the whole room holds its breath at the doors, what follows will leave everyone unable to speak. Tell us in the comments. Jasmine, where are you viewing from today? Bennett repositioned the draping silver sash. Over her shoulder, birthday queen, shimmering under the restaurant's warm glow chandeliers that she had chosen for this location months ago. A sleek, high-end location named as for its elegant and gourmet cuisine. Tonight's ambiance was meant to be excellent. Tasha Reynolds, her best buddy, leaned down to give her a little prod. Jokingly, girl, you're actually 30 now. Felt elderly. But Jasmine sneered and flipped a, excuse me, I feel like curling over her shoulder. Differentiated, the table exploded in. Laughing, the eatery was still crowded. Their corner seemed to be a separate universe. Voices overlapping. Wine glasses clinking in jovial conversation. Platters coming in sophisticated presentations. Jasmine, it was all, had desired a private but lively assembly of her closest friends and family, commemorating yet another successful year in life, and waiters from sisterhood go through it with perfected balancing trays with precision. The aroma of barbecued food in the entree and cocktails, buttered steak, lobster, and truffle. A gentle jazz melody flooded the air as risotto performed over invisible speakers, adding a hint of refinement to the mic. Jasmine's younger cousin was going to be mid-story regarding some issue at work, while, a shadow hung across the table. The voice interrupted the laughing as if a sharp, unwelcoming blade. Greg, the manager of the restaurant, Whitman, stood, hands clenched in a tight expression like a disciplinary school in front of him. Jasmine, the teacher, stared up at him, was distracted by the interruption. Is anything wrong with her? Questioned in a stern but kind manner. Greg's eyes darted across the table. Prior to deciding on, we've had some complaints, Jasmine, from other visitors regarding disruptions. Tasha SM nodded from this table. Loud enough for him to understand what you're saying in a restaurant. Jasmine made her chuckle. Glass down, we're just enjoying ourselves gently. We're not being rude or unruly. Greg moved about on his feet, but we endeavored to preserve a certain ambiance. Here he finished a waiter before he could showed up with a tray filled with 3 chocolate cake sparklers and tears flashing across the scene. It should have been a happy time rather than the table's tension had already subsided. Its deep Jasmine claws exhaled, making herself keep her cool. So, just to be clear, you're coming. I'm over here now on my birthday. I can tell since the cake is there in front of me. Greg, we're ruining the vibe. Pursed high slips, I'm only carrying out my duties, ma'am. The Jasmine. The word was dripping with disdain. Noticed the little change in his face. The disdain in his eyes was scarcely concealed. Despite his phony professionalism, she would see numerous times before. Tasha folded her arms a few times. So what are you requesting? That we depart? Because unless we're violating a real regulation, which I don't find out why you two are at a nearby. Glances in their direction from the table. Greg exhaled, aware of the growing tension, strikingly, as though he were the victim in this entire look. I would want to inform you that this is an upscale restaurant that isn't a Jasmine's nails pushed into the nightclub. The dog whistle was in her palm. The inference. She looked around the eyes of the restaurant, looking at the other, mostly white customers participated in lively discussions and flowing beverages, latter flowing as freely, yet no one was policing their joy. Jasmine's voice was steady and engaging, but cool, as I can hear a lot of sounds. In this eatery, I observe many conversing and laughing at tables, but where Greg's is the only table you visited. His face trembled, his calmness crumbling. Simply, let's be honest, I'm not quite sure. Jasmine tilted her head and cut in. Precisely causes a disruption at our table. Greg cleared his throat as the tension increased. "If you don't lower your throat, ma'am," voice, "I must request that you leave Tasha's." The chair scraped back. "Therefore, you must be Malik is usually the peacemaker. Am I right?" Raised a hand and said, all right, we don't require a scenario. Our purpose is to." Jasmine breathed through the celebration guy. She forced a tight-lipped grin with her nose. "Greg, we will remember the mood. But we're not leaving," he said. Paused as though considering whether to push, then he turned with a firm nod. On. His heel before leaving the table. Tasha sat in startled silence for a moment. "You know." She lowered her voice and leaned closer. "That's correct." Jasmine didn't. She didn't have to respond. Instead, she grabbed the cake knife and started cutting Litun to eat. But the festivities. Minutes later, it was already soiled as the plates of cake were being distributed around. The whispered discussions at the table searched for their former warmth. The incident has left a sour just as Jasmine took a mouthful. Flavor of her dessert, the atmosphere changed once more. Presence came closer, but this time it was a policeman, not Greg. And he was heading directly for their. Jasmine's fork lingered above her at the table. Dish the birthday's decadent chocolate. Her cake tasted like ash all of a sudden. Mouth the cop whose coming at their table's presence was such that it made. Despite this, the air feels cooler. His suit in the soft lighting of the restaurant. His expression was sharp, and at every turn, he made, in the direction of good evening. They appeared to extend time. The cop spoke in a nice voice but authoritative with Miller on his nameplate. The management called us regarding. There was a commotion at this table, and then silence. Throughout the group, Tasha's jaw tensed. Usually the laid-back one, Malik said he put down his fork and reclined in his chair. His face, Jasmine's heart thumping, unreadable herself to look him in the eye straight. She repeated the disruption. Officer Miller nodded slowly. The manager opened a little notepad. Claims that there were grievances about excessive chatter and unruly conduct. Jasmine's mouth opened in shock that she looked about the eatery at the groups of people enjoying wines, and no one else appeared to be laughing. Receiving police visits, her voice appeared measured, yet we're a firm officer. A birthday celebration that we've been discussing and laughing like every other table. Officer Miller, that is prohibited right now. No, ma'am. But the supervisor has the authority to contact us if he thinks that things are getting out of control. Tasha give a quick, uncontrollable chuckle. You must be making fun of the officer's eyes. Glanced in her direction. Ma'am, I just must verify if everything is all right here. Jasmine balled her hands into fists. We were all right under the table till the manager chose to pick us out. Sighed and massaged his temples. Guy? Crazy. All we're trying to do is eat. Tasha plunged forward and never wanted to back down. Forward her tone, which was infused with sarcastically. How many other birthdays are there? Events on which Greg contacted the cops tonight. While I'm sitting here and I notice a great deal of noise in this restaurant. But no further tables are receiving, questioned. The lips of Officer Miller, it was obvious that he wasn't squeezed together. Searching for conflict, but he wasn't, in the process of backing up in front of a room abundant in now. Others were observing. Eyes darted. Talks had slowed. Towards their table, some of which were stuffed with interest, in others with it as well recognizable combination of discomfort, effort, and Jasmine let out a silent judgment, pushing herself to remain. Calm down, officer. You understand what's going on. As you can see, this isn't a disruption, it's about how we're perceived. As a glimmer of something is the issue. Across the face of Officer Miller. Perhaps comprehension or hesitancy, but a fresh voice cut before he could reply. Is there an issue among the tension? R had come back here standing only a few arms folded across his chest, feet away. He had a neutral look, but Jasmine seen the flicker of contentment in his eyes. He had intentionally done this, officer. You're the one who turned to face him. Miller Gregg nodded as I called this in, and I attempted to manage it on my own. But they were receiving aggressive. I must consider the experience of Jasmine, one of my other guests. The term sensed was breath-hitched aggressive, like a shock of electricity, to her back. Greg, what specifically did we do that was aggressive? Playing up his innocence, he shrugged. Act. You spoke louder and I sensed uncomfortable. This is a classy restaurant. I operate a certain type of vase. Jasmine gazed at him. The temperature rose. There's a certain spot in her cheeks. Officer. She understood precisely what he meant. Miller rubbed the bridge of his nose and groaned. He didn't appear excited to be a part of it. Of this, although he wasn't necessarily, he's either going to shut it down, or examined Jasmine once again. Ma'am, if the management is requesting that you leave, you can't. She banged her fist on the table. Seriously? The cop raised a hand. Look, I don't want to make things worse, but the management is free to decline. Service, Jasmine. I need your cooperation. For a while she closed her eyes and willed herself to maintain her composure. Everything within her yelled to defend themselves and not make this man revealed his own self aloud. Yet she was also aware of how she wasn't going to let things go out of control. To provide him with that. Slowly, with joy, she reached for her. Will, leave, Tasha whipped with the purse fee. Jasmine, it's not worth it. Malik stood shaking his head. She whispered. Headman, this gang is absurd. Sprang to their feet and gathered their possessions. The joyous spirit of the darkness had entirely gone around them. Individuals feigned not to gaze, but the pressure of their focus pushed down like a blanket made of lead that some people ignored. Others leaned in, attracted by the discomfort. By the scene that is developing, Jasmine, even I hope. She turned to Greg and spoke. This was worthwhile, and Greg didn't reply. He had already won, therefore he didn't need to. Officer Millard stepped back, offering room to depart. But in the same way that Jasmine began to move something inside of her, refused to accept that this would not stop. She took out her phone in this manner, swiftly tapping into her contacts. The phone rang twice before a recognized voice. When the voice reached Jasmine, she turned to Locke, looking into Greg's eyes as she whispered into the, I need you to come down to the phone, sis. Greg's smugness hit this dinner rather quickly. A different expression briefly appeared. Jasmine noticed it. She grinned, and Greg Whitman noticed many entitled clients in his. He took satisfaction in his years of running this eatery, himself on maintaining the space's elegant, and, above all, the appropriate type of setting that implied individuals who understood how to behave and adhere to the unwritten guidelines and how to depart from their alleged complaints at the door. But as her pals, Jasmine Bennett unwillingly moved in the direction of the exit, something seemed odd, and there was a finality about it, but there was also Greg couldn't get rid of the uneasiness that how Jasmine had given him a grin after constructing that phone call. It wasn't a person's grin that had lost, it was someone's grin, awaiting the arrival of a storm. In Jasmine, purposefully, walking slowly, Malik was shaking his head in rage, and the remainder of their party was apprehended. In the middle of mute incredulity, and the whole diner was enraged. Become a spectator for their humiliation, even if the majority feigned being engrossed in their supper. A pair muttered, looked aside uneasily, but none of them had to speak up. The valet hardly made eye contact outdoors. Communication as he picked up their vehicles. That there was a lot of summer humidity in the city, adding to the scene's overall weight. Jasmine's hands tightened around her phone. Her heart was still pounding, and she wasn't Putting this aside, a black SUV arrived at the curb. The driver had little time to change into park prior to the rear door opening. A lady wearing a well-ironed uniform showed off her badge's gleam, capturing the sun while making adjustments. She moved with the holster at her hip. Accuracy, authority, and kindness, dazzling appearance that attracted attention prior to her. Even said a Jasmine, Captain Naomi Bennett breathed, straightening her back as she. The incident caught the elder sister's attention. Naomi wasn't just any police officer, a patrol officer answering a phone call. She held a high position as captain, admired the type of officer who created others follow the rules just by being in the same. She wasn't only come to check in space, she came here to express herself. The sound of boots clicking on the pavement. She moved ahead, taking in the Jasmine's jaw tense, the constrained Tasha's angry posture, similar to Malik's. His fists flexed as if he was having trouble preventing himself from striking. Something occurred. Naomi's tone was composed, but Jasmine was familiar enough with her to hear the Greg walked beneath it. Warning, standing close to the door outside with the arrogance of a guy who thought he'd already prevailed. But as soon as his eyes landed something in Naomi's uniform, his stance changed. Jasmine didn't care for sweets. Covering it, we were commemorating The manager over there didn't celebrate his birthday, such as how we were interfering with He phoned the police and informed them of the situation. Naomi's head was tilted as we were hostile. A little Greg moved forward in an aggressive manner. I promise you, Captain, he cleared his throat. This is unrelated to Naomi's eyes, snapped abruptly at him and uncompromising. I don't remember talking to. Greg quickly stopped talking, Jasmine. Officer Miller was still laughing, lingering close by and observing more. He was uneasy and had his hands on his belt, slipping uncomfortably as he became aware the circumstances had totally changed. At last, Naomi gave him credit for the yes ma'am responding. Officer, do you notice any committing a crime for no apparent cause? My sister's pals and I had to be led away from this. Miller, the establishing officer, paused. He was aware of this and wasn't a terrible officer but he also had no intention of throwing. The management was also under the bus. The manager summoned us in fast and told a commotion occurred, and Naomi cut him off. And you got there and evaluated the circumstance and ascertained just what? Miller tightened his jaw. A little, that there was no real danger. Naomi's brows raised. Without any real danger. Nevertheless, my sister and her visitors were. Miller remained silent when asked to leave. Greg used that as an opportunity to intervene. Captain, I was only keeping the integrity of my business, which provides us to a certain customer base. And Naomi's head slanted. Once more. Go ahead, she murmured. Voice with a dangerously smooth end that Greg faltered in his speech, seeing that late enough to have walked straight into a. So Naomi, did you turn back to Miller? Miller said, no, and shook his head. Did you have any grounds to believe, ma'am, they were a danger to public safety? Ma'am Naomi, please wait a moment. A moment before she completely turned to face. Let me be clear with you. Greg contacted the Department of Police Waste Resources and feeling ashamed about paying clients as you weren't pleased with how they were occupying your area. Greg's expression redeemed. I don't advise you to do it. Naomi, be cautious what you say next, stated that the restaurant's doors had opened. Once more, a well-dressed man in his late 50s walked out with a tense face. He was becoming older and balding, which worried a little bit, with an air that implied that he didn't frequently involve himself in day-to-day activities of the Greg. The restaurant's proprietor appeared anxious. The man's gaze shifted from Naomi to Greg and the police that were monitoring earlier. I'm Richard Fow, and I've decided on Jasmine. Do you own this restaurant? Is anything wrong? Officer. Naomi didn't even need to respond. Miller decided to become your manager. Contacted us about a group of paying clients. He answered in a cautiously neutral tone. No. No laws were broken, and there were no disruptions. Discovered that Richard's face had darkened as he looked at Greg. Is that accurate, Greg? Swallowed forcefully. I was only attempting to uphold the experience that we pledged to Richard. A customer narrowed his eyes by phoning the cops during a birthday celebration. Jasmine's arms were crossed, but we were at disruption. Richard let out a quick breath. Greg hesitated inside now, but one glance sent Richard running as he looked at his face. Through the doors, Naomi stepped backward. Richard, seeing the man vanish, returned to Jasmine. I apologize for the incident that just occurred. Not the way we do business here. I would like to rectify the situation. Jasmine met his gaze. And what specifically are you going to do? Richard paused before clearing his neck. Your dinner is free, and Greg won't be a problem at the ER anymore. Jasmine was uncertain if he intended to say fired or just managed in a different manner, but honestly, she didn't give a damn. So Naomi went to her. Voice is quieter now, and you're doing well? Yes, I am now, Richard. Jasmine nodded, gave a single nod before vanishing again, allowing the stress to build up inside. Natasha exhaled on the pavement. She shook her head, which was gratifying. Malik smiled. Greg won't likely make it to his. Jasmine turned to Naomi for the following shift. Her heart swelled with thankfulness. Naomi grinned and said, You know I love you. An effective power move had begun the evening. When a party devolved into a horror and concluded on a positive note. Jasmine took one final peek up at the eatery. Prior to letting go, this birthday would undoubtedly be one to keep in mind. The tension outside the eatery at last began to disintegrate, leaving behind only the residual remnants of what had recently occurred. The peaceful night air carried a hum of release from the burden of unsaid. There are still unanswered questions between Jasmine and her pals, but there was another factor, also something lighter. Jasmine exhaled slowly with triumph. Observing her sister, Naomi stood alongside. Her badge remained on her hips. Shining beneath the eatery's entryway lights, there was a calm assurance about her, as if she had witnessed everything. As if she understood just how it would manifest as soon as she exited the SUV that Jasmine had given her. A sly glance you liked but didn't. You gave me a small smile. Naomi, Tasha. Eventually she rolled her shoulders and sighed, as though she were personally removing the whole weight. Well, that was something. Malik gave a little chuckle, for I understood that the second it went to the left, Greg began discussing. Upholding. He raised the volume of his voice and jokes aside. This is a fancy restaurant. Jasmine snorted in establishment. Oh, that? The man believed he had us. And Tasha laughed. Prior to Captain Bennett entering like the racist's grim reaper nails me. Laughed and was shaken by Jasmine's talent. A sneer formed on his brow. But the wrath was there. But it was in something today. Otherwise a feeling of contentment. The evening hadn't gone as planned, but it had at least not come to an end in the sort of catastrophe that Greg had been. A notion that she was hoping for came to her, and she turned to Naomi. You genuinely believe that he's? Naomi was dismissed. She shrugged. Maybe not tonight. But wait a week. No one enjoys terrible. Malik's phone buzzed when he looked at the television and then smiled. Someone at the restaurant was fired by him. Simply add it to manager calls on Twitter.police at a black birthday celebration. But they get examined by a female black police commander as Tasha waited for the real Malik. Her eyes widened. Rotated his phone to allow them to view a grainy image of Naomi standing in outside the restaurant. The outfit was gaining a lot of likes and retweets already. There was a mix of fury in the comment area, commendation, and some traditional. Jasmine laughed nicely when she was ridiculed online. His career and hospitality are gone. Naomi grinned but continued to speak. They stood there even though he did it to himself, there for a while, enjoying the. It wasn't often that things led to victory. Too many times it has played out this way. Greg and others were able to get away with their silent prejudices hardly concealed. Disrespect cloaked under regulations and guidelines. However, the tables had turned. Jasmine turned to face you, Naomi. Remaining, or do you need to obtain? Naomi looked at her watch and said, I can stay a while. Malik smiled. Since we're not going to conclude tonight. Tasha nodded in agreement with that note. But where was the birthday girl? Jasmine thought. For a second, and then a gradual smile appeared. You see what's on her face? There's allocation on the street late at night. Nothing extravagant, just excellent music and beverages. Tasha pounded her fist, saying, No racist managers, we need the energy that's currently in the air. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Are you certain that your Jasmine offered her a chance to do more tonight? Look, you believe that Greg's gibberish is shaking her head, she said. I'm going to ruin my 30th. Not at all, Mick, that's what I mean when I say that. They piled into their vehicles and drove away. Restaurant and the intrigue that surrounds it ahead. Neon lights illuminated the downtown streets. The hum is reflected from the damp pavement of nightlife is still humming. The tension that had previously existed dissipated with every block that passes is swapped out for the rhythm of something fresh and happy. That was just what the late-night lounge was. They required a DJ playing and dim illumination, the smell of fried food and vintage R&B. The location was drifting through the air, crowded, but in a welcoming manner, avoiding crowds that are too crowded. Instead of shuffling, they swayed to the music. Uneasy in their chairs, they discovered a Jasmine at the center of the table by the bar like a queen taking back her evening beverages. When Naomi came, she remained glued to club soda. The one in charge, but Tasha had a before. The server, each of them held a margarita, even left while the song continued to vibrate. Laughter poured through the room. When the group settled across the table, returning to their own rhythm at some, Malik vanished onto the dance at that moment. Floor was instantly enmeshed in. The Tasha laughed at the place's excitement as he, a red-dressed elderly woman, spun both, two-stepping dramatically, as if Jasmine they were at a family barbecue. Naomi leaned back and exhaled softly, catching. The change in her face is good. Jasmine nodded, saying, Yes, I believe I just. Naomi had to take a breath and I looked at her. I am aware that tonight did not go as planned. Jasmine gave a huff, chuckle modesty, but Naomi kept you going. Jasmine tilted her head to handle it. Naomi grinned and said, Well, you handled it. Know just who to calling. Jasmine made me smile, of course. They silently clinked their glasses. Recognition of their relationship. Tasha shuddered and slipped back into her seat. She was amused by Malik's antics, but this, perhaps the greatest birthday. Tale ever. Jasmine's eyebrow went up. You believe that I desired for my hero to include police officers and Tasha a racist manager. No, but I do believe that years. You're going to recount this narrative from now on. People are going to every gathering. To enjoy it. She imitated an elderly woman's voice with an unseen wine glass in hand. I'll tell you everything about the moment. The eatery attempted to eject me, but the sister of the big evil police captain shut it down. Jasmine exploded all the way down into, Tasha stops laughing. You know I'm right. Jasmine trembled and I grinned. Her brain was still chuckling, but after. I'm choosing a location this year where I don't. Naomi took a taste of her and needed to call back. Drink amused. Most likely a smart move. The night continued to be filled, with music, with delight, with the warmth that makes the turmoil of earlier seem like the event at the restaurant in distant recollection may have tarnished the evening for a moment. But Jasmine, it hadn't defined it, had left with her head held high, and she was finally celebrating in the proper manner. She desired to be encircled by her folks, laughing and taking control of the moment. Fee never looked better.